Hello, my name is John Jung. I'm the chairman and co-founder of the Intelligent Community Forum and the executive director of ICF Canada. We're pleased to be working with the BC government and with Infrastructure Canada in providing this webinar, which focuses on the Smart Cities Challenge. Before I pass the webinar on to Jenny Tremblay, who's the Senior Director of Policy and Programs in the Smart Cities Challenge team, and with her colleague, Alex Long, also a senior advisor of Infrastructure Canada focused on the Smart Cities Challenge, and all of the panelists, let me just take a moment to introduce the Intelligent Community Forum and its Canadian affiliate, ICF Canada. ICF, also known as the Intelligent Community Forum, is both a think tank and a global network of cities, towns, and regions. We explore, inspire, and work with communities to leverage information and communications technologies, especially broadband and its disruptive applications, as well as its analytic data to help to transform communities, build economic prosperity, solve social challenges, make their communities more livable, and enrich cultures. We focus on people, but recognize that smart and advanced technologies enable these things to happen. ICF publishes books and white papers, organizes conferences and workshops, helps communities to accelerate their transformation through exploring case studies, benchmarking, and also undertaking strategic programs. ICF also holds an annual awards program and has developed national organizations and institutions for the study of smart cities and intelligent communities. ICF has been doing this work for over 2 decades, and we've qualified nearly 170 cities, towns, and regions as Smart 21 cities and intelligent communities, from small rural communities to large metropolitan areas. ICF has created opportunities to service and work closely with a growing number of communities. We are now at 37 communities across Canada. Finally, what I'd like to do is provide some housekeeping before we move on. Our webinar is basically sold out. We have a very large number of attendees on this webinar, so attendees will only be in listen-only mode, and they'll be able to ask questions by typing them into the questions panel on the side. We're recording this webinar and we'll make it available on the ICF and ICF Canada websites. So if you need technical support, please note the numbers on your screen. The panelists today for this important webinar include Darren Ricci, who's with Thought Exchange in the West Kootenays in the Nelson, BC area. Rob Entwistle, who is the CIO of the City of Kelowna. Emily de Rosenroll, who is the CEO of South Island Prosperity Project in Victoria, BC. And then we have Jenny Tremblay, who I've already mentioned is the Senior Director of Policy and Programs in the Smart Cities Challenge at Infrastructure Canada, and her colleague, Alex Long. I'd like to now pass the mic over to Jenny. Jenny, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, John. It is a pleasure to be part of this ICF event. Gerard Peets, Director General of the Challenge, really appreciated being a part of the last webinar held by ICF on this subject. Here at Infrastructure Canada, we're just getting into the business of working with communities to leverage data and connected technology. ICF has been there for 20 years, and John has been the driving force. This is a really opportune time for us, this webinar, as we're in the midst of the application phase for the first competition of the Smart Cities Challenge. So we are very grateful for the opportunity to speak with people in the ICF network about our challenge and to build on the first webinar. I'm also joined by my colleague, Alex Long, who will be here to respond to any questions, as I'm fairly new to this role, but extremely excited to be here. And I'm also very pleased to be joined by this exceptional panel of community leaders. I'm just trying to advance my slide here. The Smart Cities Challenge was launched by our Minister Sohi, back in November. The challenge before communities is an exciting one. Come up with your best, boldest, and most impactful ideas to leverage data and technology for the betterment of your community. The best ideas, as selected by an independent jury, will be funded by the Government of Canada. Let me take a minute to touch on some of the high points. For more detail, Infrastructure Canada webinars are available online. 3 prizes are currently available. 1 prize of $50 million open to all communities, 2 prizes of $10 million open to communities with populations of under 500,000 people, and 1 prize of $5 million open to communities with populations under 30,000 people. Eligible applicants who can apply alone or in groups are municipalities, regional governments, and Indigenous communities, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. With the competition now open, now is the time for communities to prepare their applications. The deadline for submission is April 24th, 2018. Finalists for each prize, each one of whom will receive a grant of $250,000, will be selected in the early summer. Winners will be selected early in 2019. So those are the basics, but I also wanted to go a bit deeper and touch on what I think makes this a truly unique and exceptional process. I'll touch on some of the themes that are important for communities to take away if they intend to participate in the challenge. By far, the most important thing to know about the challenge is that it is up to communities to lead the way. There are no preset goals or priorities in this process. There are no pre-identified technologies to use. There's no common standard of technology or complexity that will be uniformly applied to all. Instead, the jury will be evaluating applications primarily on the basis of how meaningful the proposal is, how ambitious it is for the community that is advancing it, and how impactful the proposal promises to be. All this is what gets captured in the applicant's unique challenge statement, a single statement that encapsulates the commitment of the community to its residents, which will be achieved through the proposed use of data and connected technology. It has to be measurable and achievable. Payments will be tied to progress toward achieving it. And of course, how the challenge statement is backed up. What was the process of engaging residents to settle on tackling this issue as opposed to another? What ideas and views did people bring forward? And how did this influence the proposal? What is the basis for believing that the proposed use of data and connected technology will achieve it? Does it build on a larger Smart Cities vision or integrated community plan to advance mutually reinforcing efforts? We truly hope to see ideas as diverse as Canada itself. We expect our communities to shine in what they bring forward. At the end of the day, I hope we'll be able to say we accomplished 4 things. We absolutely want to achieve outcomes for residents in the communities that win and move forward to implement their Smart Cities vision. But for everyone who participates, we hope they will come out of the process better able to innovate. And along the way, we want to create opportunities for people to come together. Communities partnering with other communities and companies, not-for-profits, philanthropies, charities, public entities, all working together within communities. By doing this, we hope that we can create the enabling conditions to spread the benefits reaped by winning communities across the country. We want sharing, we want open data, and we want solutions that are replicable. So I hope that everyone who is motivated by this type of thing decides to get involved. Community leadership is key. I know that my fellow panelists have been doing great things to get their residents and stakeholders involved in a discussion. This is really where it all starts. Defining ambitious, meaningful, achievable outcomes is where the rubber hits the road. How these outcomes coalesce into meaningful and measurable challenge statement will be the biggest factor considered by the jury in selecting finalists. And no doubt, most communities who are considering getting involved have already done a lot of work in these areas. We will want to see how your Smart Cities application builds off past efforts and amplifies them toward doing something really important and meaningful for your residents. I would invite all of you to visit the challenge site at impact.canada.ca, as well as the Infrastructure Canada site, which currently houses the call for jury members, which is actually recently closed. I'd also like to invite you all to get involved in the conversation on Twitter using our hashtag SmartCitiesCanada. Tell each other what you're up to. Spread the word. Finally, my office welcomes hearing from you, especially potential applicants who may have any questions about the guide or the overall process. We're here to help you apply. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to hearing from my co-panelists.
Well, thank you, Jenny, and really appreciate you stepping in for Gerard. You did a great job. Darren Ricci is now going to provide us with his insights. I really want to make it known that we really appreciate all of the panelists sharing this information. I'm sure it's of great value to all the communities who are still looking in and thinking about how they're going to rally their community around these big and bold ideas. So Darren, please go ahead.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jenny. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Darren Ricci, and I think it'd be really meaningful at the beginning to give you an idea of who I am as a citizen in British Columbia and Canada and why I'm interested in this. I personally grew up in northern BC, and I started a career in tech and software in Vancouver longer ago than I care to admit, but a little over 20 years ago. And that career took me to Denver, and then back to Vancouver, and San Francisco, and then back to Vancouver. And a couple of years ago, I found myself and my family relocating to the Kootenays, and it had to do a lot with lifestyle and some choices outside of career. And the thing that was really interesting to me, or has been interesting to me since the first week we landed in Rossland and in the area that we're talking about today, is this unexpected factor of encountering remote work all around us. So there's people working remotely. There are a lot of people working in the knowledge sector. Quite frankly, there are a lot of people that are working and just don't know that each other are in the same sectors or relative. And although it's not a direct correlation to the Smart Cities Challenge, I think it really exemplifies the benefits that broadband and smart technology are bringing to rural areas. So if you stick with me on that, you'll see where we're coming from in a few minutes. But it's been really interesting having grown up in a small community in northern BC, now living in a small community in southern BC, and seeing the true amount of change that's happened over the last 20 or 30 plus years in how people are communicating and working, and quite frankly, how portable what they do is. So a little bit about where we started in this region. I would say, and I'm definitely not responsible for it, but a part of it, it was very much a grassroots effort. I work for a company called Thought Exchange that was founded in Rossland, so we're 120 plus people. We're an example of an organization that has about a third of our employees in the Kootenays in smaller areas. We span to Vancouver, Port Moody, and have people as far-reaching as working in New Zealand. But it's one of these examples where a company really can start somewhere smaller, and we just happen to be, by sheer coincidence with this challenge, a group insight platform as well. So the founders of the company on down really care about, well, how are we impacting the communities that we're in? And when this kind of came onto the radar, we thought, well, okay, is this something that's really interesting for Rossland to get involved in? And what quickly happened in talking to city council here, talking to citizens, I would call it sort of quote unquote stakeholders, is a lot of discussion stirred up around how do we help these communities we're in, and like how wide reaching should this be? Like we as a company and we as individuals feel like we bear some responsibility to bring these kinds of efforts to the community. But the most interesting thing is the biggest question we found in starting this is like, okay, if we've got common interests with people in the area, and we know this is something bigger than just Rossland, how wide does this go? So the initial stages brought a lot of discussion that I'm sure a lot of people on the webinar are involved in right now, or really trying to quickly figure out so you can get to the root of what your challenge is that you're going to address. It was like, what makes sense? Do we do this in just Rossland? Do we go a little bit wider? Will going too wide sort of compromise our chances of winning? And through a couple of lengthy meetings and a lot of collaboration amongst stakeholders in these four communities and around, we kind of landed on Nelson, Castlegar, Trail, and Rossland. And to give you a little bit of an idea for anybody who doesn't know where we are, if you see that little blue dot on the map on the left-hand side, that's where I'm standing right now. And then you get a little bit of an idea of really the geographical stretch between the communities that are involved in this and the neighboring communities is about 90 kilometers. So it's not a massive area by standards of comparing to Metro Toronto or the Lower Mainland or anything else. But it is a rural area, and we just felt that for our case, and this doesn't apply necessarily to anybody else's cases, that these communities shared common interests in what we're experiencing in growth and transformation, and where a challenge statement could really have some impact to common challenges we're having. I think one thing that we're seeing that happens in a lot of parts of Canada, or a lot of Canada is experiencing right now, is where we have resource-based economy here that's quickly transitioning to a knowledge-based economy. And that certainly doesn't mean that the root of the resource-based economy is going away. A lot of these organizations have been around for 50 to 75 to 100 years fueling the economy in the West Kootenays, are experiencing a change amongst their residents, or experiencing a change amongst the workers and the people and why they're coming here. So that's been a big factor on how we're thinking about this. And then there's a second piece of, with what's happening in metro areas across Canada, especially the Lower Mainland, we're seeing a relative influx of residents who are discovering this area actually exists. So if you look at the map, like, I mean, you have to look for us a little bit. You know, we're 7 hours from Vancouver, 7 hours from Calgary. There's a joke in Rossland, frankly, that, you know, the best thing about Rossland is 7 hours from Vancouver and Calgary, and probably the worst thing about Rossland is from 7 hours from Vancouver to Calgary. So you really have to want to live here, and you have to want this lifestyle. But again, the biggest surprise to me as a citizen coming here was there was really no restrictions on career, on how I live as a citizen, on these things I was doing in the city that were that impactful to how I sort of moved forward. I moved here for personal reasons, and quite frankly, efforts like this Smart Cities Challenge really stand out to me in the group because they allow to level a playing field so more people can make significant choices about where they want them and their families to be. So bear with me a little bit, because I'm going to pull this back even further and say a couple of examples of where this started. This really started with conversations, whether it be on Facebook or things that we talking about in the community or community forums, whatever it be, or quite frankly, people bumping into each other in the grocery store. Rossland examples are the city installed LED lights last year. It was a big topic of conversation. Some people liked it. Some people thought there were too many lights. Can the lights be controlled remotely? What's happening? We're having a record winter this year, snow like we haven't seen. We get a lot of snow on average, but we're having a lot of snow like we haven't seen in probably 15 to 20 years in the last month. Well, a lot of people talk about snow plows. Why is my street not plowed right now? Where do the plows start? When do they end? Do they plow all night? Well, interestingly enough, I mean, if you think about broadband, you think about connectivity and the fact that this Internet of Things and smart devices enable us to kind of know all this information should we be able to put the efforts and the mechanisms in place. A lot of these questions can be answered. So as we start talking about the challenge and talking about the impact it had on the community, I found that we started at a really high point and then quickly had to start drilling down and go, okay, well, how are we going to get the relevant feedback from the community for something that's really impactful and even encompasses a lot of these things, or might just focus on one of these particular things? Well, and why this is really important? Well, the thing we keep drawing back to, and if I'm to give some advice on this, is where I have highlighted in the challenge statement: improve the lives of the residents through innovation, data, and connected technology. Because this is actually not an easy thing to do. I'm sure everyone on the call is finding that, and that's why you're on trying to get as much advice as you can. I would definitely not say that we have it figured out yet. And the unnatural sort of back and forth we've gone between is like, do we keep it amongst a group of stakeholders, or do we get as wide of input as we possibly can? And where we've landed is we need to get as wide of input as we possibly can. I mean, Thought Exchange happens to have an insight platform we can use to go to the citizens, which we're going to launch this week. And we're hoping to get as many ideas from the absolutely inane all the way through to really crisp things that we just haven't thought of, because somewhere in between on that spectrum, there are kernels of wisdom that are going to allow us to hone down a statement that benefits the residents of the area most. It's important to us as well, and I think it's important because what I was alluding to is my initial stance, quite frankly. I even discussed this with John on a prep call a couple of weeks ago. I said, you know, this feels a little bit unnatural because this is a competition. I'm not sure why I want to talk about this openly. But then we quickly came around to the fact as a group in our meeting last week going, this is really about collaborating for big wins on a national basis, because if the worst case scenario we have was we don't get shortlisted as a group between Nelson and Castlegar and Trail and Rossland, we're going to all of a sudden have a footprint of community leaders, stakeholders, a lot of people, knowledge workers or otherwise, who care about this, and there undoubtedly will be impact that has on the efforts we're trying to make as a community. So I think that all of these communities face different challenges, but they're also likely many of the same challenges. Some good points to wrap up on, I think, are just as far as a community journey and transformation, to really land on a valuable challenge statement. Like I said, we need to engage the community, and we're trying in any way possible to engage the community as much as we can. The stakeholders represent the community, but I think the challenge we'll have now, frankly, between today and getting something honed for the beginning to the middle of April is that we're going to need to quickly get the word out as much as we can and hone that feedback down. Our lessons so far, move really quickly. Quite frankly, if I could buy 3 weeks back, I would. I think we've got a lot of work left to do, but we've got the right people to do it and the right mechanisms in place. Go wide and deep. And I mean, to what I alluded to, get as much feedback as you can. The unexpected inputs, I think, will lead you down a really valuable path, and we've had some of those already. And just, the theme of it is collaborate. So I am absolutely happy, and I got to be careful what I wish for here, but to offer any more of the input and experiences we've had so far to anyone who's interested. Please feel free to reach out informally by text, by email, by LinkedIn email, whatever works for you. But thanks. I look forward to hearing more from the groups and seeing where this goes.
Well, thanks, Darren. I appreciate particularly your comments about collaborating for the big win. I guess we'll talk about this later, but you've already won, haven't you, by building your collaborative, broader community and making those connections and the opportunities that will come from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this on now because we're kind of tight for time, and then we're going to take a whole broad set of questions at the end and have a conversation among all the panelists. So thank you, Darren. I'm now going to pass this on to Rob Entwistle. Rob?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen. And first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to share Kelowna's Smart City journey with you this afternoon. And I'm going to give you some background on Kelowna first, and then outline our process for the Smart Cities Challenge. So first, where is Kelowna? Well, if you took Darren's little blue dot and moved it over a valley and went north a little bit, you'll find Kelowna. You can see on our little inset map there. Kelowna is a mid-sized city, about a population of about 129,000, and we're located on the shores of Okanagan Lake in south central BC. We're the largest community between the lower mainland of BC and Calgary. So we play a pretty pivotal role in a lot of the goings in the Okanagan Valley, and we work hard with our regional partners. We're growing a vibrant community. We have UBC Okanagan University, Okanagan College, an international airport, and a growing high-tech center. We're also getting smarter, or at least we're trying to get smarter. We're building out our broadband foundation. We have a dark fiber network now in the city of Kelowna, and we're working with TELUS and Shaw with their networks to expand that even further. We've done a number of smart city projects over the years, including LED light replacements, Internet of Things sensors, and a lot more data collection. We've also challenged ourselves by applying for grants and awards, including ICF Smart 21 program, and I'm happy to say we were one of the Smart 21 cities for 2018. It is a really good program if you're looking for ways to really stretch and find out what smart cities are all about. However, being a smart city or intelligent community means going beyond the city projects and engaging and partnering with your community. In 2016, we started a community engagement process, Imagine Kelowna. Kelowna is a city in transition, and Imagine Kelowna is the community's vision on how we thrive in the face of unprecedented growth and change. The real aim of Imagine Kelowna is to deliver a long-term strategic community vision that will help the city's short and long-term planning priorities, as well as define our relationships between plans, strategies, and partnerships. We really want to set up the future of Kelowna to be successful in this constant shifting world. The net result was over 4,000 resident contributions. This vision is created by people who live here and one that will ultimately be implemented by the community itself. So the one message I can really say is find your engagement processes, get out there and talk to your communities. The city will now work to align our plans and our strategies to the Imagine Kelowna vision. These will include plans like our official community plan, which is now starting a review process. Some of our major plans like transportation plans and other parkland type plans. And importantly, our intelligent community strategy moving forward. Intelligent communities don't just come from one award or one competition. It's really starting to set a new strategy and a new direction for the community. So we are fortunate to have already started the collaboration and the engagement with the Imagine Kelowna. There are 4 guiding principles that the community vision outlines. And the SMARTER principle aligned very well and its goals with the Smart City Challenge. So we've chosen to leverage the work done there, along with other inputs, including our citizen survey, our council priorities. And from those, we've developed themes that we're going to take out to further workshops to really challenge them to look towards a very unique and impactful challenge statement. Those themes are development of an inclusive community, so addressing homelessness, resiliency in the face of climate change with a focus on water, which is really important in southwestern and southeastern, or the south of BC, as well as healthy neighborhoods for all. So managing growth and development in our growing communities, which just isn't a thing in Kelowna, but it is across BC. So these themes will be used at upcoming workshops to develop what we hope is a very impactful workshop or a very impactful statement. Successful intelligent cities will engage their community, including government, business, industry, and academia. For this challenge, we've partnered with Urban Systems and Accelerate Okanagan. Urban Systems is a professional consulting firm committed to supporting vibrant communities, and Accelerate Okanagan is the Okanagan's top accelerator and resource hub for the tech industry in the Okanagan. They will work through us with these workshops, the development of the proposal. We'll involve subject matter experts from the community to define our challenge proposal and identify solutions. The challenge looks to leverage the benefits that data and connected technology have to offer, excuse me, and we'll be working closely with the data and tech community through this process. We actually have a design lab happening in an hour. So as soon as I finish this presentation, I'm going to be moving over, and we have over 50 subject matter experts and interested community members who will be working through a design lab, which really aims to explore the smart cities movement and challenge all the participants there to look for the art of the possible in these 3 priority themes. Because we're not sure yet what may come out of here, and it may come from a totally different stream. So again, it's that constant engagement. The ideas gathered today and from other interviews will work towards having the final challenge statement refined by March 1st. And in this tight timeline, will hopefully give us time to complete the proposal. Our intention is to have the proposal completed by April 24th. The work that the city has done with Imagine Kelowna, our dark fiber and open data and analytics initiatives, has positioned us well for the Smart City Challenge and to be an intelligent community. What we learn from this challenge and what we learn from these engagements will carry on as we develop our intelligent community strategies. This is really an exciting journey, and the Smart City Challenge is a great opportunity for us to showcase our capabilities, refine our capabilities, and help set us our direction going forward. So thank you. Thank you for the time this afternoon, and I'll pass it back to John.
Well, thank you, Rob. I particularly enjoyed listening to your alignments, the way you've got citizen surveys and council priorities and themes established, and look forward to hearing what the results are from your design lab. We'll have more conversation around some of these points later and through the Q&A. At this point, I'd like to introduce Emily de Rosenroll, who's with South Island Prosperity. Emily, are you there?
I'm here, yes. Hi, how are you?
Thank you. And we see your
I'm
slides.
just trying to, okay.
There we go.
There we go. Can you see it well?
Yes, we
Very
can.
good.
Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Emily de Rosenroll, and I'm the CEO of the South Island Prosperity Project. And I'm having trouble with my slides. Hang on, sorry. There you go. So the South Island area is the capital region of BC. We're actually the second largest metro region in all of BC with a population of about 370,000. We're well known for our tourism. We're well known for our tea and flowers, but actually we're now a thriving technology hub as well. So that technology is now our largest sector, and we have sectors such as high tech, software, ocean technology, marine, manufacturing, agri-foods, tourism, and of course professional services being the center of government for BC. So that is a sort of snapshot of what we are. We're actually a much younger population than we're known for as well, for our healthy retirement community, but our average age is only 44 years old. So another myth buster. I'll just tell you a little bit about the South Island Prosperity Project. So we are the Regional Economic Development Agency, and we were formed only just under 2 years ago now. So we're a public and private partnership model, which originally brought together 28 members and now has 40 members. We have 10 municipal governments out of 13, 5 First Nation communities, 3 post-secondary institutions, the UVic, Railroads and Camosun, 2 nonprofit organizations, 5 industry and sector associations, and 15 private sector members. And here's just a look at some of the members here. So the big picture for us, a major takeaway of this, the federal challenge has been a wonderful opportunity for us to come together and really use it as a departure point or a rallying point for the community. And it sort of segued from conversations that we'd engaged our community in beginning last year, in fact. And so we took this off sort of in earnest around April last year, and have been working, really developing a lot of the engagement strategy around it. So it was well aligned. However, we really see the Smart Cities Challenge as a catalyst and not a final destination point. As Rob mentioned too, we certainly feel that we are already really greatly enriched by the work that we've done already, and there's a lot of opportunities and projects that have already catalyzed or been underway now as a result of the rallying point of the Federal Smart City Challenge. So here's a look at our overarching picture. We're forming a 2040 vision, which is something in development with not just stakeholders, but with the general public as well. And that's sort of a broad point of view for a 22-year period. What are the different ways in which being smarter can actually push forward human outcomes, social outcomes, and economic development ones for our community? So that's the broader picture. We're also looking at within the next 2 to 5 years, focused on the Federal Smart Cities Challenge. And in the short term, we've been launching our own initiatives that I'll tell you a little bit more about, like our Open Innovation Challenge. So just a look at our overall structure. We have our board of directors, and below that, we have a coalition on our steering committee, which has different stakeholders from representing groups from technology, the social sectors, life sciences, et cetera, et cetera. So a really broad intersection there. And it's deeply connected to our Municipal Partners Committee, which you can see is the advisory committee and really sets a lot of the framework, and then tells the steering committee to figure out how to make it actually happen. So that's a nice place to be. And the steering committee then heads up different priority area subcommittees. So we really spent a great deal of time understanding how can being smart improve our economic and our social and our human health outcomes and our environmental outcomes and so forth. So we spent a great deal of time there trying to build a consensus around what really is the challenge and the greatest opportunity for our community. And we decided on 5 major themes to take us through that 22 years. And those are human health, environmental health, economic resilience and inclusion, housing and affordability, and environmental sustainability. And so we looked at those 5 areas and have been able to start looking at what are different SMART projects in those 5 systematic areas that can really move the needle? And also, how do we start measuring progress and look at indicators and outcomes and so forth, and engagement, of course. So we actually drew this from the Vital Signs magazine, which is a wonderful publication, and it's the 13th year this year, from the Victoria Foundation, part of the Canadian Foundations Network. And it has been taking a pulse, if you will, of the community for the last 13 years. So it gives us some valuable data, and we've taken that and departed with that. And I'll show you a few ways that we've done that. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is citizen engagement, and we've done some different projects within that space to really get people involved in the ideation period. So we've launched our Smart South Island website, and that's a website where you can go and see all kinds of podcasts and blogs and so forth from the different people in our community and outside the community that are engaged in smart city type approaches. We've also allowed people to right there on the website share your smart ideas, and then learn how to get involved through different events and activities and competitions that we're running. So our Smart South Island Symposium was our first big engagement with the public, where we had over 300 people, residents, really just a diverse mix from entrepreneurs and businesses and to retirees and so forth. So really just a broad intersection, and we brought some people to talk and to facilitate the discussion in this sort of design thinking approach. We had different speakers like Charles Montgomery, the author of Happy City, and we also introduced things like cowbells and so forth, and to liven it up. I'll show you here just a slide on the panelists we had representing, again, those 5 key thematic areas, and also an international expert from Portugal. And then here's a few pictures. We used a Menta Meter. It's an app that allows you to, in real time, pull your audience, understand where their heads are at and hearts are at, and also what is the demographic profile. So we were able to take a snapshot and see, okay, who's in the room and which are the demographics that we really need to work on engaging, such as the under 25, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. It was also a tool that allowed us to create a thought bubble, and as we asked people for their most important value word, and we could see it getting larger and shrinking and so forth right in front of our eyes as people learned how to try to influence their peers in the room, which was sort of interesting to see that naturally occur. We also kicked off our own South Island Open Innovation Challenge, which is a local version of the national competition, and we've invited people to submit their own best and brightest ideas for making the South Island a smarter and more sustainable place. So this event the competition will culminate on March 11th, when we have the audience again come before the public and be able to present their top ideas to be chosen for a winner of the prize. 3 prizes, actually. So that you can see we did a lot of engagement around this as well. We were in a mall all day long. We did different information sessions, probably 4 or 5 in different places. And last week we announced our top 10 finalists. So we had a total of 69 applications, which was really pretty amazing because they were not the usual suspects. We really found it was an interesting way to see, how everybody has that friend, or maybe it's they themselves that have that really brilliant idea and haven't necessarily had a platform to give it some energy and life. And so this was one of those opportunities. I'll just give you an example of some of the innovation it stimulated. And you can see the 10 finalists here. Some examples are carpool program, harvesting abundance, it's a way to leverage the food production that's going to waste in your community, ways to keep seniors at home or engage more, personal mobile homeless shelters, ways to connect, solving overdose problems and things like that. So really just a very interesting and diverse group of proponents there. So that's all for my presentation. I'd like to thank you so much for your time, and happy to take any questions if there are any. Again, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Emily. We're going to go into questions, and as people write their questions in, we'll have them come to me. I have a couple of additional questions here anyways. But let's make this a panel discussion, first of all. If I say your name, then it's a specific question, but when I ask a general question, anybody can jump in. How's that? So let's start off with Jenny and Alex. I do have a specific couple of questions for you first, and then we'll go into the general panel discussion. Given the application submission deadline is pretty close, it's April 24th, is it actually a little bit too late for anybody who hasn't already started to begin to develop their applications?
You know, that is a very pertinent question because we are obviously in the midst of our application period. The application period was launched in November, and as was mentioned in Jenny's presentation, April 24th is our submission date. But the point is, it's not too late. But if communities haven't gotten started, I think actually a great way to get started is to actually look at the other presenters today and really learn how you don't have to start I guess or reinvent the wheel in terms of how you engage your residents, how you really hone in on your challenge statement, because as you heard from the other presenters that the actual development of the application form itself hasn't happened for many of these folks, and so there still is good time to start engaging your residents, finding out what really are the major issues that they would like to see addressed in their communities, and then how a Smart Cities approach addresses that. So again, the message is it's not too late, but if you are interested, get started, and we're here to help.
Well, thanks, Alex. Well, that's a very interesting perspective, and I just wonder if there are communities that are listening in. I'm sure they're asking this particular question. So what does the first meeting look like when you just get started? What did your first meetings look like? For instance, Emily and Rob and Darren, what did your first meetings look like?
Well, Rob here, I think the real focus on our first meetings are to listen and really just try and hear what, based on some of the broader challenges, I think the cities, like from a city perspective at least, we always look at, we're trying to set direction and maybe not listening. So we're really trying to go in with ears open and really look for that art of the possible and see where that leads us.
So you had a whole series of questions coming from people from your community. Were you able to then act on it? What was the second meeting like?
Well, we're just going into that today. So from those, we start to narrow it down and give a little bit of direction for how that might now work and what solutions and where there may be the information data and systems that can support it.
So going back to Alex then, since the first competition information was launched last November, what kinds of questions are you receiving from communities?
Well, that's some of the questions are ones we expected and others we didn't, which is great. So we're able to it's caused us to think about some of our assumptions. But I would say, the questions have evolved over time. So a lot of the questions in the beginning were around eligibility. So as you can imagine across Canada, there's many different forms of local governance, community governance, and Indigenous governance. So a lot had to do with either regional districts or municipalities wanting to know how they, if they could submit an application on their own, and what did that mean for their constituent communities and back and forth. And the short answer for that was only one application per community per competition, but more fundamentally, the point was communities needed to speak to one another, and I think the example given just just in the Kootenay is fantastic, where it was about the communities talking to each other and figuring out, what is the most strategic way that they could collectively work together to address an issue. So, I think going back to it, that the challenge is about responding to what are the most meaningful issues or concerns for residents, and then what is the best approach and the scalability for that. And so, kind of, as I said, a lot of questions about eligibility, and where we've kind of migrated now is, as communities are developing their applications, questions about the application form itself, and a lot of issues around the challenge statement, because as again in other presentations was shown that is the most important part of the application form. It has the most amount of point-weighted criteria. So getting the challenge statement right is really important. And so a lot of communities are wrestling with, in a good way, of linking a challenge statement to stakeholder consultation, resident consultation, and something that is going to be really transformational for their communities. And so that's kind of where the questions have migrated now. Questions around stakeholder consultation, which you've already kind of flagged here, which which were some great examples. And so I'd say those are the kind of the main types of questions we're getting around eligibility, challenge statement, and some specific questions on the application form.
So the sense of community, as opposed to a single city, or maybe it's a bit of a misnomer, then it should be Smart Communities Challenge, because a lot of these communities are really whatever they define as community. It could be one city, or it could be several communities, like Darren explained in the corridor around the Kootenays. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of look at our applicant guide, which has our eligibility criteria, basically our eligibility around kind of what constitutes a community is clearly laid out as either a municipal government, an Indigenous government, one that's responsible for services. Each of our prize structures or each of our prize categories is based around population, so we're ensuring fairness across prize categories as well. And so it's up to communities to determine that it doesn't make sense for them to apply alone if the issue they're looking to address is unique to their residents, or is it something that makes sense if services are delivered more broadly across a number of communities? Does it make sense to have an approach that encompasses a range of communities, and together does it make more sense from what they can bring to the table? So as I said, it's really up to the communities to determine what makes sense for them. But at the end of the day, though, our criteria is very clear about what makes an applicant for this challenge, and it is a order of government, be it a municipal government, a local government, or an Indigenous government, meaning Métis, First Nation, or Inuit. And so that's fairly clear on the criteria there. But for all of these things, though, what we request each time we get a question about eligibility, as well as to give us a call, because what we want to do is each situation is unique, and so we do want to make sure that we're giving as targeted support or advice as we can.
Well, just a very quickly, Alex, maybe just one last question for you then. As the communities develop these applications, you mentioned how important the challenge statement is. Well, what should they place the greatest emphasis on?
Well, that is, I would say, of all that, the greatest emphasis is on the challenge statement, because as mentioned, that it does make up the highest weighted factor in the selection of finalists. And so the challenge statement does encompass, or it should reflect, the true needs of the community and be meaningful for that community and its residents. So in other words, the jury will be looking for evidence that the results of resident consultations, engagement activities have informed the proposed projects and the expected impacts for residents. So On the flip side of that too, though, beyond just kind of the importance of the challenge statement, we'll also be looking carefully. What's really important for applicants to do is really back up that challenge statement. So what was the process of engaging residents to settle on tackling this issue as opposed to another? What ideas and views did people bring forward? How did this influence the proposal? What was the basis for believing that the proposed use of data and connected technology will achieve it? Does it build on a larger smart cities vision or integrated community plan to advance mutually reinforcing efforts? So these are kind of, I'd say, the core parts of developing your challenge statement and your application. Because what we have been hearing from communities, and we've been fairly quick to address it, is that often communities will come to us with a specific technology or specific service, and then try to kind of develop a statement that supports that specific technology. And that's not what it's about. This challenge is all about is it something transformative communities that's really based on something transformational for residents. So it's technology is not an end unto itself. It's really about seeing how does connected technology and data, how are those solutions identify communities the best placed to address the challenge statement or the issues raised by residents.
Well, thanks very much. Any of the panelists, do you have any questions of Alex in terms of what was just covered? Okay, I'm going to continue on with some questions. One of the questions was to get a sense from the panelists. So what if you don't win this particular Smart Cities Challenge? What do you get out of it? Anybody want to take that on from the panelists? Darren, Emily, Rob?
Darren.
Okay, Darren.
I think I alluded to it at the end of my presentation, but I think there's a lot of benefits from it. And I don't think they were really apparent at the beginning. Like I said, I think looking at the criteria for the challenge statement, the competition overall, it's very clear to go, there's these X amounts of money that you need to get a group together and decide how big that group is and decide what your challenge statement is, what you're addressing. But once we started to peel that back, the actual process of figuring out who and figuring out what really led us to a bigger why of, oh, well, actually having these communities talking, and I don't mean to allude that we're not talking already. There's a lot of fantastic efforts underway between these communities already. But it just seems that when you have a common goal between any group of stakeholders, all of a sudden possibilities open up that are probably way outside what you actually intended, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any unique challenges, Darren, within your own community? I mean, were there any unexpected challenges that came up from your group throughout this process?
In actually getting the group together, or the identifying challenges themselves, John?
Yeah, well, both. I mean, when we had a conversation previously, you said that there were unexpected challenges that came up, and you know, getting a group involved is a big thing, and some community members may have a different perspective and collaboration sometimes.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge to date has been actually figuring out composition of the group. You know what I mean? Because you have this natural inclination as a resident of BC or resident of Canada and then a resident of community to go, okay, well, let's include everyone. But we actually were considering going broader throughout the Kootenays. But for lack of a better way of saying it, I guess, like when we kind of put some things on a whiteboard, talked about the pros and cons, it just came down to us for manageability too. Because if you look at the span of prizes and the size of population relative, you kind of got to decide what you're competing for and what's manageable to get done by the end of March. So it wasn't easy deciding size of group.
You have to also define what your community is, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, you know, we're a part of the Columbia Basin, and that community stretches all the way up to Valemont to Revelstoke and all across. It's a bigger footprint, and you know, part of us kind of went, well, maybe we should replicate that footprint. But the discussions probably did what they were supposed to do in the consultation among stakeholders, at least, and kind of going, you know, this is the right size group, and here's the reasons why, and let's move forward now.
That's good. Emily and Rob, is this whole process bigger than the Smart Cities Challenge itself? I mean, what if you don't win the Smart Cities Challenge? You still get something out of this?
I'm happy to jump in here. It's Emily. Absolutely. So we were sort of fortunate in our case that, the Greater Victoria area has never actually collaborated on this scale for regional economic development before April of 2016. So we were just sort of hot on all this momentum and building out these plans. So we've begun some of these regional roundtables in our first year, trying to develop what's the vision for the future. Where are we trying to take ourselves as a regional community with all these different stakeholders? So when the Smart Cities competition came up, we were already actually developing conversations around how to become a more clean, connected, and competitive region. So in that way, we were lucky. But I'll say that even if we don't do anything past, the federal challenge doesn't exist, we would all be extremely grateful that it was there for a while in order just to really bring forward a lot more energy and enthusiasm to have those conversations. And I think that's something that we can say that we've already initiated projects and we're committed to doing them in the future. Next year, we're doing our own Future Innovator Challenge as an example and focusing more on youth. So it's something we were actually in China this year. We were meeting with the Shanghai group. They're listening to what they're doing, and they also do similar work where they're outreaching to youth and trying to really build this into a sustainable change of behavior really over time. So I definitely think it's something we should all be doing, whether or not there's a challenge or not.
So as you said earlier, Emily, the challenge is a catalyst or a journey, and it's not the destination itself.
Exactly.
So Rob, in Kelowna, did you have this conversation early on? Why are we doing it, and what if we don't win? What's the value of it?
Yeah, I think I'll echo again what the Smart City Challenge for us has been is a catalyst and an additional learning. We are already heading down the path. We'd already identified that these intelligent community concepts and direction we needed to move on. What it's done though is being able to give us something to really engage the broader community. So the university, the health areas, IH Interior Health, our high tech community, and even beyond our city borders into our more regional community. So I think that's rather than the city just saying, "Oh, we're going to be an intelligent community," when it starts being talked at a more national or provincial, regional level, it gets a lot more people interested, and it gives us something to leverage and set our direction from. So it's good timing for us, and even if we don't win, we're still heading in the right direction, and we can use this to still implement things. So we're quite looking forward to it.
Well, this conversation just elicited another question from the audience, and that was, so this is one challenge with a certain amount of money coming behind it. So Jenny and Alex, is there another phase? Can you give any information about could this work that's being done by these communities, if they don't win, could they then work towards a future awards process?
Yeah, that's a great question. 2 points, and one actually kind of flows back from your previous question, is that something I just really want to underline, and I think what's really unique with this program or challenge is that finalists do receive, so even if not selected as a winner, but if you're selected as a finalist, you get a $250,000 grant that basically you can use toward developing your plan, your business case, your final proposal. We're not putting any, it's just a pure grant. It's not bound in any specific ways. So even if not selected a winner, but if you're selected as a finalist, then there's 5 finalists per prize, that's a great opportunity for up to a year to really kind of hone in and develop your strategy, really cement those business relationships and stakeholder relationships and partnerships, and really make that case So at the end of that time, if not selected as a winner, you've though developed like a fantastic proposal that you've probably likely brought another capital, brought another investment, really situated your community for a strong success for implementation of your proposal, even if not winning the final prize money. So I think so in terms of situating a community to really thrive, I think just even going through this process of applying for the challenge, but even being selected as a finalist is something really valuable to shoot for. In terms of future challenges, though, is that we do have 3 competitions of this challenge set. So as I said, we've just launched the current, or just a few months ago launched the current competition, and we plan within the year to then launch the second competition. And so I think what's really going to be unique is that, or not unique, what we plan to do is really take the learnings of how this first competition is going and then adjust and amend as we go. So the next competition may not look exactly like this one. Some of the prize structures may be a little bit different. Some of the other elements will have lessons and other kind of best practice that will come out of the experiences of those involved in the current competition. So it'll be a different landscape for when the next competition is launched. And applicants will have, I'd say, a lot more resources from which to, or learnings from what communities are doing now to kind of base and develop, say, any subsequent applications for any future challenges. So this is number 1 of 3, and so we will though learn as we go, and hopefully, we'll continue to have such strong interest in communities across Canada in future competitions.
Well, thank you. A question came in talking about the alignment between the work that the communities are doing today to react to the Smart Cities Challenge and existing strategic plans or ones that have been worked on over the last several years. So the question really is about the challenge fit with existing smart city strategies. Do you think that as part of this process, the strategy that currently exist in communities might in fact be impacted, and some of the projects that communities might have put on the wayside previously might now come forward? What's been the experience in the 3 communities that we have here as examples? Anybody can jump in.
Rob here. I don't think it's had a huge impact. I think this, I said the intelligent community was an area we were heading to anyway. So if anything for us, it reinforces it. A lot of these initiatives and thoughts need to get incorporated into, as we said, our official community plans or transportation plans all incorporate pieces of this. So I think they're beneficial both ways, and will grow going forward regardless.
Darren or Emily?
Yeah, this is Darren. I mean, the example I would give, and it harkens back to your previous question as well, just about the benefit, is that in a lot of cases, I don't feel like there's a lot of wheel reinvention should be going on. But if we're learning from each other, like these community groups, on what's a priority, we're coming out of this process, and whoever's not shortlisted has learned a lot. Because I'll give you an example from 5 minutes ago. I mean, looking at Rob and Emily's priorities they've outlined for their areas, it had a lot of value for me as part of a local technology organization and part of a local CAS, a local technology hub as well. Just to kind of go, yeah, we should be thinking about those things. And it was completely out of the context of the Smart Cities Challenge that raised that. So I think that there's a lot of benefit. But I agree with Rob too. I think there are certain things that have momentum that are already underway. It probably just helps with prioritization, possibly.
Emily, did you want to jump in on this?
I think we're all in violent agreement here. So, I completely agree. I think that it's something that we can continue to build on, and the lessons that we're going to learn from all of Canada are really going to be invaluable for us going forward.
A question that came in, can someone speak to the alignment between federal and provincial governments vis-a-vis supporting communities to become smart communities? Maybe that's a question for Alex and Jenny.
Well, I guess, I mean, if it's the term, if it's the question is around regulatory drivers or what's being required of communities, as I said, federally, I mean, the challenge is a competition open to communities across Canada. So we're certainly, there's no requirement to have any kind of provincial matching of funds or alignment of programs. I mean, if this was, say, an Infrastructure Canada funding element that a community was applying for, that would be a different situation. But as this is a competition, it's up to the communities to align how they wish or not their smart cities application with any other kind of provincial mechanisms. But as I said, from a federal perspective, that there's no requirement from our end that there be evidence of any alignment with provincial programs, because this is a competition, not a traditional funding program like the Gas Tax Fund or the Build Canada Fund.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to go back to what Rob Entwistle said. You're working on your projects anyways. Is this financial award, Rob, essential for any part of your community, or do you just see this as an incentive for some particular project that might not have had the funds available to it to maybe go ahead?
Yeah, I think what it's going to do is accelerate some of these potential projects or solutions that really take us to that next level or that next generation. I think some of them would probably happen over time, but to really expand them in a different way, then I think you need this catalyst, both challenges, money, getting people to think different ways, because budgets are so tight, tax dollars are so tight, it's hard to sometimes move into arenas of new areas of new technologies, et cetera. So I think it's very important for that. Whether Kelowna is the one who ends up getting it in the end or someone, but it'll move us all forward in the end.
Absolutely. I think anybody there can use $10 million towards a specific project in your community, couldn't you?
Well, yeah, no, I think that's the thing. And I think the real thing I've taken out of the challenge, or the approach we're taking, is that if we can do it, if we can demo it, if we can pilot it, if we can grow it here and it can be replicated elsewhere, then everyone wins. And I think that's the way we're looking at it, is what can we put in play that can be reproduced across Canada in different communities, maybe communities larger than us, communities smaller than us. And I think that's kind of how we're challenging people to look at it, is maybe it's not just a Kelowna or an Okanagan solution, it's ones that can be used elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the whole concept is to be scalable and replicable and so forth. Well, one thing you said earlier interested me too, because we've noticed it at the Intelligent Community Forum over the last 20 years. We've been asking people for information, and oftentimes it's information that they haven't ever thought of before. So they actually build a group together, a collaborative group, to be able to answer these questions, which then are used to select them for the awards that we give out. And for many years, there were lots of complaints. Oh, these questions are so hard, we can't answer them. We have to pool together and bring people together in a room to answer them. And then after a while, they realized that's how they built a collaborative community. Different departments, different agencies, different organizations, public, private, institutional. And they came back to us after a couple of years saying, the best part of this entire exercise, whether we won or we didn't win, was that we went through that exercise and we were able for the first time to build a community audit. Why have to hire a consulting firm? Instead, we brought the community together and we built this information base that we then created to make our strategic plans or our economic development brochures and so forth. And we use that information to share with others. So I think that this challenge is similar. It's providing an opportunity for your community to go out like you are in the next few minutes and developing this design lab in Kelowna, and you'll be able to pull together a community that probably hasn't worked together before, and will probably now work together moving forward. I think that's very useful in this whole process. I see that in all of your projects, and commend you all for it. Is this the biggest benefit that you see coming out of this, aside from the money?
Rob here. I think for us, well, I shouldn't even share our inner secrets, but the first part of that is really breaking down the silos within the city itself and really getting engagement across teams. We always work together, but this brings another one, and then the challenge of taking it out to the community is a huge benefit, and I think it's going to change and how we look at things. And it's really about, if I go back to our even Imagine Kelowna, it's about getting the community's vision, then aligning our strategies with that, which is really flipping it on its head from how we used to think about things. So it's yeah, it's a good challenge, and it's a lot of work in progress, and we're not there yet, but we'll keep at it.
Okay, we're nearing the end. I'd like to ask Alex and Jenny, if it's possible, if they could talk a little bit about the jury. When will it be announced? Will there be names attached to who the jury members are? Are they from across Canada?
Definitely. Yes. So I think, as Jenny mentioned in the opening presentation, that the jury application process period ended at the end of January, and we have an excellent raft of candidates from across the country, and so there's a vetting process occurring right now, and once the jury is selected, all of the jurists will be made in terms of the name of jury members, their bios, their photos. Those will all be made available on our website, and they will be announced through Twitter. And so, as is kind of the foundation of our program of transparency, they'll be open. Everyone will be able to see who the jury members are, where they're from, their background, experience, and the process by which the finalists will be selected, and those names should become available toward early spring.
Great. And you're saying that it's closed now. Will they be the same people who will participate in future, or will you get a new jury together by that time?
That's a great question. I think what our intention is that, because this is a program that is as much about learning by doing, and so that if, for example, through this first competition, we find that we may need to tweak or change or have a focus a little bit differently on future competitions, we need to ensure that that our jury panel reflects that. And so it doesn't mean that our jury won't change over time, but I think the intention now is that we have a great raft of candidates that will meet our current requirements, and if changes need to be made moving forward, then we will be flexible and seek out jurists to meet certain demands or needs.
Well, thank you very much. So we're going to be nearing the end of our webinar, but before I do, and hand it back to Jenny and Alex for some concluding comments, what I'd like to do is invite each of the panelists to summarize their comments to the listeners in the form of this question. What have you found so far as the most important part of the Smart Cities Challenge experience coming out of your community collaborations? Emily?
The most valuable. I think that what is really interesting to me is the way that it encourages something that a lot of people call design thinking, or that interdisciplinary approach. So I think we live in a very complicated world, and it takes a lot of different types of thinking and different types of people to come up with some of the solutions. So it really has nicely married the technologists with the social scientists, and they come up with interesting creations as a result. So I think that really just as a method of stimulating innovation, it's been just really impressive. I also think it's a great way for the federal government to try to engage communities in a really fun way, which is nice because it's just more transparent and it's open, and it's been positive and upbeat. So we're appreciative.
Darren, what have you found to be the most important part of this experience?
I think, John, the collaboration, like leading up to the competitive aspect. So the collaboration really about, it's just as much about the journey as the destination and what we're trying to figure out for this challenge statement. But if you extrapolate this from our West Coonies group and you're hearing about the great things happening in Kelowna and Victoria, well, all of a sudden you're getting a good sense of what's happening in all of southern BC. And you go to making British Columbia more competitive, and then you've got all the provinces and territories being competitive. And it sounds a little wishy-washy, but all of a sudden you've got all of this competition happening in Canada. Yeah, there's going to be 3 prizes awarded, but the amount of collaboration and effort that's put into that and what it will come from it, there's just no way that every group won't have something tangible come of this, whether or not they win the prize.
Absolutely. Okay, and Rob?
Yeah, I'd say we have a growing university college environment. We've got a burgeoning high tech group, and this is a competition with a big dollar figure. So it's a huge, it gets people talking and it gets people to meetings, and it's much easier to pull them all together. So I think the biggest learning is having these kind of challenges with, as Emily said, in a unique and different way, is great. And I'm really looking forward as it kind of goes forward.
I'm going to also ask, before I pass it on to Jenny and Alex for concluding comments, I'm going to ask them that question. What have you found so far that's been the most important part of the Smart Cities Challenge experience? Alex?
Yeah, those are, and I was about to say, I think inspiring is a word that comes to mind more than most. I mean, when I just even listened to those last concluding comments from our fellow panelists, I mean, that's exactly what we wanted the outcome of this challenge to be. I mean, it's one thing when you design a program and you talk to lots of different people and you think you've explored every avenue, but you never really quite know until the program is launched, because this is a big country, a diverse country. Yet, I think what is coming out is that for us is that it's from across the country, the interest, and I think the word used by co-panelists was, fun, exciting. It's a catalyst, and I think what this is, it's causing communities to really think about how they govern themselves, how they align their priorities, how they speak to their residents. And I think all of these outcomes are exactly what we wanted to see happen as part of this process. And so I think at the end of the day, we're just really happy with what we're hearing from communities, the kind of questions that we're getting, and I think we're just really excited to see once that April 24th date comes to see applications roll in, because I think we're going to see a really neat diversity of challenges and issues, and a lot of similarities as well across the country, and I think from that we just for us launching something that is a competition that the federal government hasn't done before is just a new way of delivering programs that if echoing what our panelists have said, it's had that catalytic effect that we've been looking for. So I think from that we're just very excited to see how things continue to evolve.
And Jenny, what's been the most important part of this experience for you?
Well, it's an interesting question for me because I'm very new into this role, and I think I'm feeling very inspired by the degree to which communities are engaged, and certainly the openness that we've seen as I've been looking at some of the questions and the inquiries that have come in, just the dialogue between the federal government and communities, which is, based on my past experience, quite unprecedented and very exciting. So quite humbled and inspired to be working with such a great crew of folks, including the panelists here on the call today, and very much looking forward to seeing the results of this current round of the process.
Okay, thank you. I am going to leave the last word to both of you, Jenny and Alex. Do you have any concluding remarks that you'd like to make on behalf of Infrastructure Canada and the Smart Cities Challenge?
I think just very, very quickly, I mean, I think we've kind of, that probably was our concluding comments to a certain extent, but I would say for those communities that are listening and have been weighing the pros and cons of competing for this round of the challenge, I really hope that they found it as inspiring as we have, because I think it's a great opportunity to really just start thinking about what a smart cities approach could mean for their communities. So pulling together consultation, getting their applications together, but really focusing on the challenge statement, a challenge statement that is rooted in what is most meaningful and important to your residents, and then discerning and determining what kind of technology and approach is best suited to achieve those outcomes that are, again, of most importance to your residents. So my comment there of our concluding remarks is that get involved if you haven't, and please follow us on Twitter, because that's where you get the most recent updates on what's happening, and if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to get in touch, because we are here to provide any support and assistance we can.
What's your hashtag?
Sorry, John, I might just add one final word, which is to note that, of course, this challenge, as we've talked about, is one milestone, but it's the beginning of a journey and of a long-term focus at Infrastructure Canada on smart cities. So for those communities who are beginning to think about becoming involved, of course, this round of challenge isn't the last. So just to continue the dialogue and the conversations, and to reach out to us if you need any support. Alex,
you mentioned Twitter. What's your hashtag?
It is smartcitiescanada.ca.
And if they were to look up the impact program that you have, what's the website information?
So I'll just quickly reset. I was combining an email with a hashtag there. It's just hashtag Smart Cities Canada for Twitter, and our web presence is impact.canada.ca.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jenny, Alex, and thank you, Emily, Darren, and Rob. Thanks very much for this very good afternoon, and I think everybody's learned very much about what the Smart Cities Challenge is all about and how you are tackling it in British Columbia. And thank you to ICF and ICF Canada, and to Matt Owen for producing this. As you can see on the screen, ICF is going to undertake a number of things shortly. On March 1st, we're having a webinar on the economic case for municipal broadband. These are free, and you can register through the ICF website. In June, we'd like to invite you all to join a Canadian delegation that ICF Canada is pulling together to go to the summit in London. A couple of really good things about participating is, as Rob and others have discussed, you'll learn more about the criteria, the indicators, and the importance of all of the different goals that smart communities and intelligent communities are working on. We have the top 7 communities of the world attending, and you can do a deep dive into learning about each of those communities. We have 2 communities in Canada, Hamilton, Ontario, and Winnipeg, Manitoba, as the Canadian contenders. We're then also going to go to Liverpool to a foreign direct investment seminar, and we invite all of you to participate with us there as well. We appreciate the work that everybody at the BC government has done to make this webinar possible, and we'd like to thank the BC government for hosting us here today. And thank you, Infrastructure Canada, for all the work that you've done to bring the Smart Cities Challenge to this point. We hope that everybody is going to work hard on their collaborations and to implement your big and bold ideas. So thank you very much for the time today. Bye for now.